Welcome to the Church of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Mother Church of the Lincolnshire Diocese, or probably better known to you as the Lincoln Cathedral. This beautiful and imposing structure has stood here since 1092, but not in its present form. It all began when William the Conqueror arrived in 1066. He had with him a Benedictine monk who was called Remigius, and who became the first Norman bishop whose diocese stretched from the River Humber in the north to the River Thames in the south, with his cathedral at Dorchester, which is in Oxfordshire. In 1072, William instructed Remigius to build a cathedral in Lincoln, which had then become the major city in the diocese. Although Remigius began the work, he was not to see it completed, for he died before its consecration in 1092. 50 years later, in 1141, the roof of the cathedral suffered damage by fire, and it was partially rebuilt by Bishop Alexander, who was the Bishop of Lincoln from 1123 until 1148. Some of the improvements made were to replace the damaged roof with stone vaulting. The western towers and the doorways were also added at this time. In 1185, a devastating earthquake caused considerable damage to the cathedral, and when Hugh became the Bishop of Lincoln in 1186, he began to rebuild the cathedral in a Gothic style. The east end of the cathedral was increased and eventually joined up with the west front. The west front was made bigger and grander. Unfortunately, Hugh died in 1200 before the work could be complete. He was canonised and made a saint in 1220. Some of the work done during this era included the addition of the east transept. The chapter house was also completed, and the north-east transept was extended to accommodate the ever-growing number of pilgrims visiting the cathedral. Over the following centuries, many additions have been made to the cathedral, until we now have this great and imposing structure as we now know it. The cathedral is visible on a clear day from as far away as 30 miles. Yes, there it is, look, on the horizon. Ah, that's better. And this was taken from the Caister High Road. After this short history of the cathedral, perhaps you would join me in a visual tour around the cathedral. Unfortunately, at the time of preparing this audio-visual slideshow, some of the exteriors and interiors of the cathedral were under refurbishment, and not all sections have been able to be photographed. One of the best ways to approach the cathedral is to follow the route a medieval pilgrim may have taken. Up the steep hill, and when breathless from the climb, you stop to get your breath and look back down the hill, and then you pass through the Exchequer Gate, where you are then confronted by the imposing west front and the towers of the cathedral, as they loom above you like a great rock face, a man-made cliff from which kestrels can take flight. Lincoln Cathedral is a stupendous achievement, yet without the desire to glorify God, it would never have been built, nor embellished, nor maintained, and each generation leave its stamp upon it in some way. Probably the only surviving section of the very first cathedral is the centre section of the west front. The round recesses over the north and south doors, and the niches on either side, are Norman, and the recesses around the great centre door were rounded, but when the Gothic screens were built, the recess was raised and given a pointed arch. On the top of the south spire is a representation of St. Hugh, whilst on the north spire is an effigy of the swineherd of Stow. He was a poor man, but gave all his savings to help build the cathedral, and now, like St. Hugh, he will be remembered forever. Along the west front is a Romanesque frieze, depicting many of the well-known biblical happenings. These are wordless comic strips, for in the Middle Ages not many of the people could read. The right-hand or south frieze are some scenes from the Old Testament, and those on the left or north frieze are scenes from the New Testament. The south frieze is at present under restoration, but one of the sections shows Adam and Eve being evicted from the Garden of Eden, whilst included in the north frieze is Noah and his ark. By the way, to accommodate the vast number of animals and all the fodder they would have required, An ark of some 36,000 tons would have been required. This would have needed trees from many forests, and many weeks, if not months, to build. There were no power tools in those days, you know. Possibly the story of the world's beginning would have been in the central portal, but this disappeared when the Gallery of Kings was inserted. These kings could be either kings of England or more probably biblical kings. Let us now move into the cathedral, and as we enter we can hear the great organ playing. Of course, the medieval pilgrim would not have heard this wonderful sound, for this organ was not installed until 1898. One of the first sections we visit is the morning chapel, which is in the northwest corner of the nave, and is traditionally used for morning prayers and for private prayer. The west end of the chapel encloses the northwest corner of the original cathedral. As you enter the nave, it opens out in front of you, and the huge pillars march down either side, holding up the cathedral on giant legs. These limestone pillars are ringed by a polished stone. It was Bishop Hugh who chose the marble, which came from Purbeck in Dorset. In the southwest of the nave is the font, which was carved in Tournai in Belgium, and was then imported into England in about the mid-12th century, probably by Bishop Alexander. This font has been used for baptizing people since Norman times, and is placed near the entrance of the cathedral to mark the beginning of a Christian's journey through life. The nave, of course, is the most public place in the whole of the cathedral, where large services, concerts, and plays take place, and, as in the Middle Ages, the nave is the place where all processions start, which, like pilgrimages, are metaphors for the journey through life. On entering the nave, a medieval pilgrim would have joined a procession moving from the west to the east. He would then move from the more secular to the most sacred areas, pausing to pray at some of the 20 or more altars. As we walk down the nave, we see the beautiful stained glass windows, both on the north and south of the nave. These windows are Victorian. The windows on the north side are a representation of the Old Testament, and those on the south represent the New Testament. And along the north aisle is the beautiful wood carvings of the forest stations. We pass the main pulpit, from which many sermons will have been given, and then we arrive at the choir screen. This is the screen separating the choir where most of the services took place, away from the hustle and bustle of people in the nave. At the beginning of a service, the clergy and choristers would enter the choir, processing through the central doorway. In the olden days, the top of the choir screen would have been used as a pulpit, where the choirmen would stand high up there where the organ is to chant special passages from the Bible. Every bit of the screen is carved with flowers, faces, and all sorts of creatures. It is studded with 20 little heads, leering, grinning, and sticking their tongues out at you. And in medieval times, these, along with the walls and ceilings, would have been painted in bright colours. We are now standing in the great transept, or the crossing, and if we look up, we can see the central tower rising above the crossing, which looks like a lantern, and is the cathedral's skylight, and is also the cathedral's highest ceiling. In the south transept to the right is the bishop's eye window, beneath which is the Galilee porch, which was traditionally used by the bishop when the bishop's palace was on this side of the cathedral. There are 3 chapels in the south transept, one of which is the works chancery. In the north part of the transept is the dean's eye rose window, and this area is under restoration, so this picture is only a representation. Below the window is the door which the dean would have used when coming in from the deanery. Along the east wall of the north transept there are 3 forces chapels, the Air Force Chapel, the Navy's chapel and the Army's chapel. Along the north and south side of the choir are the choir aisles. The entrance to the south aisle is covered with a beautiful and deep carving. Within these beautiful carvings, dragons hide behind the foliage, but men with swords seek them out. The southeast transept, together with the northeast transept on the other side of the choir, form a secondary or east transept. In the south of the transept is the St. Hugh's Arcading and Bishop Grotesque's tomb. Along the south choir aisle is the Bishop Longland's Chancery, which can be used for private prayer. Cards requesting prayers can be left here to be read and placed on the high altar. The Russell Chancery, like the Longland's Chancery, is a small annex with a tomb chest placed in the wall. The altar painting is by Duncan Grant, circa 1958, and this reflects the chapel's dedication to St. Blaise. On the north side of the south choir aisle there are some late 15th century South German wood carvings representing the scenes from Christ's Passion. And as we enter the St. Hugh's choir, we can hear the choir singing. St. Hugh's Choir is a church within a church and is the oldest part of the Gothic cathedral and is still used for the choral worship of God. The choir stalls, these have an origin of about 1370, are beautifully carved. Some of these carvings are on the mercy seats, so called as they tip up, providing a ledge on which to rest during long services. The canopied and pinnacle stalls were seats for the canons of the cathedral, who make up the general chapter. There is a large brass chandelier of circa 1698, and also a brass lectern where the Bible rests on the wings of an eagle, the strongest of birds, so that the words will carry far and wide, and the eagle's claw grips a globe. There is a beautifully carved pulpit which sits in the northeast of the choir. The remains of the founder of the cathedral were placed in the most sacred area, by the high altar, and next to the Easter sepulchre are the tomb of Christ. The altar is in the sanctuary. This area was rebuilt in the late 13th century to form part of the angel choir. The angel choir is so called because of the host of angels in the stonework high up in the structure. The angel choir was built during the geometric period of Gothic architecture, characterised by the more complex geometric window design and naturalistic carvings. As can be seen in this view, looking towards the grey east window circa 1327. This is the first of the Gothic 8 light windows and measures 59 feet in height. In 1280, a shrine was built to hold the remains of St. Hugh, but was unfortunately destroyed during the Reformation. In 1330, St. Hugh's head shrine was built, with a jewel casket on it, which held the relic of the head of St. Hugh. This shrine gave easy access to the vast number of pilgrims seeking miracles. In 1986, to commemorate the 800th year of the arrival of St. Hugh, the jeweller and sculptor David Poston designed and made a sculpture in brass covered with stainless steel, whose lines represent the back and neck of a swan, which is said to have greeted Hugh when he approached his manor in Stowe Park. In the roof of the angel choir is the figure of the Lincoln imp, who is said to have caused havoc in the cathedral and was eventually turned into stone by the angels. In the angel choir there are 5 chanceries: Bishop Longland's, Bishop Russell's, the Cantaloupe Chantry, where there were 2 tombs, but these were damaged by the parliamentarians. In the northeast of the angel choir is the Fleming Chancery. This was erected by Robert Fleming, the Dean of Lincoln from 1452 until 1483, for his own soul and for that of his uncle Richard Fleming, the Bishop of Lincoln, 1420 to 1431. Alongside the Fleming Chancery is the Burgess Chancery, in which now stands the 1984 pottery candlesticks, designed and manufactured by Robin Welsh, and these are dedicated to Gilbert of Sempringham, a native of Lincolnshire who started the Gilbertine order, the only medieval monastic order founded in England. As we move down the North Quarrel, we pass the monument to Bishop Wordsworth, 1869 until 1885, and he was also the nephew of the poet Wordsworth. In the northeast transept there are wall paintings of 4 early bishops of Lincoln. Then we pass through the ever medieval door and along the passageway called the Slipe to the cloisters. The word minster indicates a large church served by clergy who are not living a monastic life, as in the case of Lincoln. Many of the canons of old lived in houses in the minster yard, or they were in parishes, so strictly speaking, the cloisters are not required. But the Lincoln cloisters were probably a desire to offer the best and most complete building to the greater glory of God. In the roof of the cloisters there are bosses with some rare and unusual wood carvings. The chapter house is a 10-sided building, which is still used for the meeting of the general chapter, who sit on the stone seats let into the walls. The stained glass windows trace the history of the cathedral from William the Conqueror to John Wesley's visit in 1790. The canopied chair is dated circa 1300. The Wren Library was a gift from Michael Honeywood, who was the dean at the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, and bequeathed his vast library of some 5,000 books on a wide range of subjects to add to the 100 medieval manuscripts already in the possession of the cathedral. And finally, we arrive back at the nave, looking westward at the great west window. I hope you have enjoyed your tour around this beautiful building and will visit it on many occasions.